Jefferson County 911.
Yes, I am a teacher at Columbine High School. There is a student here with a gun.
The day was normal. I was walking between classes. I had gone a different way because I had a crush on a guy who was in the hallway.
I ran to the bathroom and the fire alarm went off. So I came back and everybody had already left the classroom.
A girl who came in yelling there was someone with a gun outside.
And they were yelling, "They've got guns, they've got guns." And I didn't believe them because that was absurd. And then administrators ran by and said, "Get them over the fence, they've got guns."
We're securing the scene of a deadly school shooting.
Littleton, Colorado.
On the edge of Denver, it has been a horror.
Tragedy with no easy answer.
The sun came up, but nothing was the same.
We'll be wondering about these young men and the effect that they've had on this community and this nation for a long time.
That was 20 years ago. And here we are today, and it's still happening.
In the 20 years since Columbine, there have been more than 200 school shootings.
In today's world, there's no way to promise a student or a child that they are going to be safe at school.
Across America,
the epidemic of gun violence in this country is unlike anywhere else.
With more than 500 victims.
School shootings have really punctured the common narrative we have about school safety in the United States.
We traveled from Columbine to Parkland to Washington, D.C. and Toronto, Canada to tell the stories of these tragedies, what has changed, and the solutions some are calling for.
We just do not want to live with those kinds of events, those kinds of human tragedies.
This is Generation Gunned Down.
The day was a normal day. It was Valentine's Day, so the students were very big on that, and there was a little excitement in the air. There had been quite a number of students in my room that had gotten hurt. 3 of them didn't make it, and then the other students they got hit with shrapnel and other injuries.
We were actually taking off our clothes and wrapping kids and to try to stop their bleeding.
And I think this has got to be it, at least for me. So I texted my husband, goodbye. I texted my parents goodbye. Something that's, even to this day, you can't even comprehend that it's real, but it is.
There appears to have been a mass casualty incident at a school in South Florida.
This image, one that has become all too familiar.
The Broward County Sheriff says at least 17 people are dead.
Knowing that after so long of me thinking, oh, it can never happen here, it really did. And it was really like a feeling of helplessness, realizing that we probably needed to say something to someone, even if it was just a shout into some sort of ether.
When something like this happens to you, you lose your sense of innocence, you lose your sense of security, you lose your sense of everything that was real to you 5 seconds before.
That no laws could have been able to prevent the hundreds of senseless tragedies that have occurred. We call BS! That us kids don't know what we're talking about, that we're too young to understand how the government works. We call BS!
I'm marching
action because our siblings, friends, family, and community should never have to have gone through this. And I want to make sure that no community ever has to go through this again.
We want to make a change in the future.
I feel like it's scary going to school and not knowing like what's gonna happen, and like, you know, like all this stuff about like arming teachers and stuff. It's just even more terrifying.
That they experience every day.
Earlier today,
to the leaders, skeptics, and cynics who told us to sit down and stay silent, wait your turn. Welcome to the revolution. It is a powerful and peaceful one because it is of, by, and for the young people of this country.
It is time to get up and do something. We need to be the ones to figure out a way to make them safe.
Our goal is for these kids to feel safe on campus so they can worry about normal teenage things, like who they're going to go prom with, their test scores, their homework. We don't want them worrying about being shot.
In the past 20 years, there have been more than 200 victims of gun violence on school grounds. And after each one, like Columbine, the communities began to self-assess.
Back at the time of Columbine, the students were speaking up and just expressing shock and saying, this has to change.
I decided shortly after Columbine that I wasn't going to be a victim, that I wasn't going to let these guys who killed my friends and killed my sister also ruin my life. I've spoken to over 1 million students in person, and so it's just a reminder to me to keep doing what it is that I'm doing and telling people about the value of human life.
Where more than 95 school shooters committed their school shootings because they were inspired by the killers of Columbine. And you know, we have to live with that in our community. And people think Columbine was the first, right? Paducah, Kentucky, Jonesboro, Arkansas, Pearl, Mississippi all happened within a year and a half prior to Columbine. In 1982, we lost our first student to a school shooting. So we still weren't prepared. We didn't do lockdown drills that failed at Columbine.
Two weeks before the tragedy at Columbine, Daniel asked me a question at the dinner table, out of the blue, based on a conversation he had with some other students in debate class. Dad, did you know there were loopholes in the Brady Bill? Brady Bill is the national law that requires background checks before a gun purchase. 2 weeks later, he was killed with a gun that was purchased through the loophole in the Brady Bill. So I felt like I had to react to that. I had to respond in some way.
We couldn't even make it out of committee because the Republicans controlled it. They didn't want anything to do with gun control. We announced that we were taking the matter to the voters, and that started the petition process.
That voter referendum closed a gun show loophole. Around the same time, the Colorado legislature changed information sharing laws between law enforcement and the school district.
It required us to share information with each other. So if a student today is arrested, anywhere in our school district, we get in our department a notification, and the principal gets a notification saying this student's been arrested, here's what it's for. And then, we can do a threat assessment immediately.
But former Governor Bill Owens and then Colorado Attorney General Ken Salazar wanted to go beyond that. They commissioned a report to find out what other areas needed to be improved. The findings were alarming. The report discovered in 81% of violent school incidents, someone other than the attacker knew about the plan but failed to report it. In response, Colorado launched the Safe to Tell program in 2004, where students, staff, and community members can anonymously share information with law enforcement.
That's your single biggest intel source of what's going on, because kids will know before an adult ever will what's happening in the school environment. And the opportunity to to have an early intervention based on that early information, that's what makes the difference. That's what defines success or failure right there. We work incredibly hard with our schools, conducting active shooter lockdown drills, training kids. Our kids are better trained than 95% of our society to deal with an active shooter.
There was an intense lack of security that day. I mean, everything that could have went wrong.
In the days and months following the shooting, parents, teachers, and the community pushed for changes, and Governor Rick Scott signed the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act into law, raising the minimum age to purchase a long gun from 18 to 21, lengthening the waiting period to purchase a firearm, banning bump stocks, which increased the number of shots fired per second, allowing law enforcement to stop people seemingly determined to hurt themselves or others from possessing firearms, requiring safe school officers, and creating a pathway for arming teachers.
Root of it, I know that there is evil in the world, and I don't think we'll ever rid ourselves of evil. So what I want to do is be prepared to shoot back, because I think the simplest, easiest place to start is to, let teachers who are already carrying or willing to carry guns, let them carry.
No one went into school. The killer could have had a knife, a hatchet, a musket, and he could have killed 17 people with any weapon, because no one went in.
I will never be armed. If that's the route this chooses to go, then I will stop teaching. I have never owned a gun, held a gun, looked at a gun. I don't want one. No.
If a kid that I loved came up to me wanting to kill his peers, I would do everything in my power to talk that child into giving me the gun. But God forbid that child kill me. Now that child has 2 guns and is going to cause more damage.
The Giffords Law Center found the U.S. averaged more than 1 school shooting per week in the 2017-2018 school year. But some experts say school safety has improved.
We have a code red monthly, and it is a practice drill. That's what the county has put into place to make sure that we are ready, on point for the worst thing that could possibly happen. My class and I are in the bathroom. The regular classroom door is locked. The lights are off in the regular classroom, and I'm in a very small space with 18 second graders.
I went with the policeman and made sure the safe areas in my class. I told my students where it is. So that kind of gives me that little bit of, okay, safety, we have a little plan.
2018, we trained over 6,500 cops in this building from 58 agencies, and we're booking out now a year and a half in advance. So it's really a place where you can come and test your tactics, try those things that work. And nobody wants to be the next Columbine. Every child should be able to go to school in an environment that's safe and free from threat, intimidation, and harassment. That's what we owe, I think, our kids. And so there's a lot of frustration when I look around the country and I see school districts that aren't taking this seriously, that have that mindset of it can't happen here. You don't get to have that mindset in 2019.
There were more Republicans at the time that were willing to talk about banning assault weapons. It lasted for 10 years. It did make a difference. We will try it again, but we started with background checks, which in many ways is the easier piece. We did it once. We ought to do it again. It will make a difference. It will save lives. It simply has become an ideological argument as opposed to a safety argument in this country. We need to get back to the safety arguments.
We need to reassess what the language of the Constitution means, parting the Second Amendment.
there are plenty of responsible gun owners. The problem is when dangerous people have their hands on guns, and the problem is when people don't have background checks on guns, and when people don't store their guns safely. We don't want to take guns out of everyone's hand. We want people to be safe with their guns. We want dangerous people to not have guns.
It's a very dangerous thing to go down this path. And then the other thing is, if you start whittling away at the Second Amendment, does that give right and cause or precedence to whittle away at the First Amendment?
No one wants to see people, be slaughtered or harmed in any way, and that's not what we want when we advocate for the Second Amendment.
No one would want it to be this way, but the society we live in, you need to be able to protect yourself, and the people at these facilities need to be able to protect our kids.
Crazies and criminals don't care about the law. They don't care about the laws on the books. They'll either pass or evade a background check, as essentially every mass shooter has done in recent memory. They won't be stopped. But if they know that, if I go attack this place and someone might shoot back at me, I think they'll think twice about that.
Everybody up here is willing to work to make our citizens safer, but not at the expense of the Second Amendment of the law-abiding citizen.
The United States seems to be the exception, where these events seem to recur over and over again, and there are efforts to strengthen gun laws, but none of them have been particularly long-lasting or that effective, I guess. One of the big differences between Canada and the US is its national legislation. It's not left to individual states, so that provides a stronger base.
The Criminal Code Authority lies with the federal government in Canada, and that's the instrument that we use to restrict firearms. In this particular instance, I think it's more of a workable system.
So if the leader of the governing party wants to introduce legislation, they generally have the votes to do it, whereas the separation of power in the United States makes that much more difficult.
You can't simply walk into a store and purchase one. There's vigorous background checks, and they're getting increasingly more invasive.
We don't need handguns or assault rifles in Canada. It's ridiculous. We don't have a Second Amendment. We don't need that crap here.
We shouldn't be talking about human violence that use guns. I mean, we should find out the cause of that and go after that and treat that.
Because when we talk about gun control, a portion of that is also pointing fingers at other reasons why something other than guns are the root of school shootings or community shootings.
A gun sitting on the counter here will not kill anybody. Not one of these guns in this store has ever jumped off the shelf, loaded itself up with ammunition, and shot anybody.
I'm for safer gun control and all of that, but that's not ultimately the answer. The problem lies in the hearts and minds of people in our culture today. That's also where the solutions lie.
It's not a gun issue, it's an attack behavior issue. Why are we seeing the attack behavior? We're going to figure that out, because until we figure that out, you're going to keep having attacks. And that's what people aren't talking about. And it's maddening and frustrating, because I want somebody to step up and say, you explain to me why we're seeing this attack behavior, where it's coming from.
We need to take away the stigmatism from mental health and start focusing on the health of our bodies from our shoulders up.
Mental health needs to be something that we need to look at a little bit better and to invest a little bit in, to make our society a better place and a more understanding place.
Schools need support, and they do need counselors, and they need social workers and mental health workers, and when these school districts say we need to cut, that's the last place we want to cut.
The vast majority of people
that perpetrate acts of violence with guns, without guns, are actually people who don't have mental illness. It's also important to recognize that if you have a mental illness, including a severe mental illness, you're more likely to be a victim of violence rather than a perpetrator of violence.
Other things is putting a Stop the Bleed kit in each classroom and having students and teachers trained on how to use those Stop the Bleed kits. Because the first responders in an active shooter situation is the teachers, are the students, and if they are able to put a tourniquet on someone's arm or leg, they could hypothetically save their life and stop them from bleeding out and dying. Alyssa was beautiful. She had the biggest smile, laugh that was contagious. She loved the beach and loved hanging out with her boyfriends and riding the waves, and she loved playing soccer.
Determined to prevent other parents from losing their loved ones, she won a seat on the Broward County School Board to fight for solutions. Solutions that could have saved her daughter and many others.
The Alyssa Law is a panic button to get law enforcement on the scene as quickly as possible to take down the threat. Students could have bulletproof backpacks because at the end of the day, if all else fails, they would have their bulletproof backpack to protect their vital organs.
A year after Parkland, the conversation is continuing. There are nearly 250 school safety bills in state houses around the country. Still, Columbine survivors are cautioning the Parkland activists that change might not come fast enough.
The challenge that I have to them is last year when I got a chance to meet with David and Emma and those others, I said, are you going to be this passionate when all these cameras are gone? Because I said, they're going to go away. And they said, no, I don't think so. The cameras are going to be here all the time. I said, no, they're not. And I hope they keep that passion. But you could be passionate about it and you could have these beliefs, but what's the next step?
Parkland has not necessarily been the catalyst that many have hoped that it would be. However, at the state and local level, there has been more action. So at those lower levels, we do see a variety of different actions. In some cases, there have been efforts to put more gun control measures in place.
I, as a 36-year-old woman, hide underneath my desk in the dark. Because that's what we do in schools now, is we take 6-year-olds and we teach them to hide from a stranger who's trying to harm them. And we do that regularly. Blows me away because I can't think of any other professional that I know regularly doing that.
People have to keep working at it to make it happen because there are people who want to see it die. They're just counting on this movement of young people fizzing out.
But for those directly impacted, they're determined to keep fighting.
No matter who you are, if you're a child, you're an adult, the fight never stops.
We have a lot of work to do. We're not done.
What good's an education if your kids don't come home at the end of the day?
What is going on? We don't like the idea of being the targets here.
We got to do something better. And you're the future. You guys are a future generation. What are you going to do?